All right, I will call this West Allis Milwaukee School Board Workshop and Special Planning Meeting to order. Could we please have the roll?
Brendan Burns,
Here.
Jane Carr,
Here.
Amy Dill,
Here.
Heather Justin, Brian Keller,
Here.
Kristen Kaiser,
Here.
Noah Lee,
Here.
Jeff Sikich,
Present.
Bill Ustra.
Here. Heather should be joining us via remotely in a little bit. All right, so today we have our third workshop on the FACT committee, and we have a lot of stuff to go through, so I'll get ready to Dr. Lexman.
Yeah, I'm gonna just get us started today. We're gonna go a little bit deeper into the process. Remember, we're trying to take the board through in 3 workshops, what the FACT team went through in hours and hours and hours of work. Today, the real goal is that we're gonna, review and where we are with the recommendations, and again, looking more closely at high school options and what that might be if we kind of consider a phase approach. So we might not do the whole thing at once, and what are those kind of options start to look like for high school and intermediate school, and ultimately leading to the board to do kind of a straw ballot of which options are kind of your first, second, and third choice. And that's important tonight because that's going to allow Bill Foster to actually write the survey questions. And in the end, that's what the board really is going to approve as the next step. And so that'll come as an action item before the board at a regular meeting to approve the final survey questions that go out to the community. And that's the piece that will, I think, really lend the information back to you that you're going to need to make decisions about, okay, which direction are we finally headed, and does that lead to a referendum question? So that's really the goal of this evening, to go through the details and the dollars, and then to have each of you identify a first, second, and third choice from all the various options that are out there. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Steve and the team.
That is on, yes.
So Matt Wolfert is our Gray representative and one of them, and he's joining us on Zoom due to COVID circumstances. So Mark is going to be controlling the on and off volume. So give us some grace here as we go through this.
All right, Matt.
All right, I'm here. I can't see the screen you guys have up though, so that might be another minor challenge.
It's the macro schedule
Gotcha. All right,
steps.
excellent. So apologize for not being in person tonight. That was definitely my intention, but had a little run-in with family member this weekend that has me joining you virtually. The schedule, as we've shared on multiple occasions, remains intact, and we're on track for working through the survey. So as we talked at our last meeting, the first 3-4 pages are in a good place. Coming out of tonight's board meeting, we're hoping that we can connect with Bill Foster and really build out the final parts and pieces of the survey to be back to you as a board in the next couple of weeks to finalize the survey for mailing. So on track schedule wise, and looking forward to learning more from the board tonight on your goals for potential solutions to be surveyed. The guiding principles been shared at 2 consecutive meetings, really were critical to the work that the FACT committee did. So we'll remain focused on those. Recap of the board recommendation. So at a very high level, as many of you know, the recommendations from FACT were to continue with our current grade configuration, or to reduce the number of schools across the district. And then, as just mentioned, we're to focus on gathering feedback by using a community survey. So we're still on track with all of those, and we'll jump right into the solution component of the project. I'm going to hand it to Caitlin to talk through tax impact.
All right, so when we went over this slide initially, Mike Clark is our Baird representative who basically ran the numbers and got us to this point. So this was just to present a high level of what a project might cost in terms of the mill rate impact. The way we should think about it is this would be in addition to our current mill rate. And you can recall the graph of our mill rate, it's been trending down over the last few years and will continue to stay low, probably within the $7 range is where we're probably looking at in the next few years here. So in terms of a project, you can see, for example, I'm just going to walk through each step. A $50 million referendum might cost, this is approximate values, a 39 additional cent on a mill rate for a $100,000 property. So what that would mean is a home that is valued at $100,000 of assessed value would cost $39 over the entire year. So if we look at a home that's worth $200,000, that would be a $78 annual increase on the property taxes. Again, the school portion of the property taxes. And for the same example, a home that's valued at $300,000, that maximum impact for that project would be $117 on an annual property tax payment. So these are just examples, $50 million, a 100, a 150, and a 200, just to kind of get your head thinking about it. So we'll jump to the highest end, just as another example that's listed on this page is a $200 million project could cost approximately $2.13 addition onto our mill rate. So what that would mean for a $100,000 assessed value on a home would be $213 annually in addition to the property tax bill. On a $200,000 property, that might be about $426 in addition annually on property taxes. And a $300,000 property, that would look at like $639 in addition to the current or existing property tax bill. So just some examples to kind of, we're going to talk through some really large numbers and what that actually means for an individual homeowner. So this is the graph that you'll kind of think back in your head as we go through these numbers, what that actually means for an individual homeowner. And this one, I believe is.
Oh, sorry. Right, so one of the pieces we worked through with FACT was a little bit of envisioning how we might get from the idea of one or two comprehensive high schools down to one comprehensive high school. And it was helpful for FACT once they saw that, there can be a thoughtful process. This is not meant to be the perfect solution or the exact solution, right? It was meant to lay it out over a couple of years of how we would go about this if, in fact, the direction we head is to move to one comprehensive high school and we are successful with the referendum, right? So the community supports this. And so the idea is in year one, we would have all ninth graders, so all students new to high school would actually attend Central, the building Central, but it would launch a new high school, right? So we would actually be starting a brand new third high school, essentially, is the concept. So we work with DPI, we get a school site number, all of those kind of things. And that begins the process of new. And it also begins the process of the Hale and Central communities of starting to size down, right, and eventually closing, right? So the concept here is that everybody attached to their high schools go through a process essentially of letting go and of starting to invest in something new, right? And so it's that idea of the whole community going through this process of embracing the new that's going to be coming. Right, so all ninth graders would attend Central because we have plenty of room there, right? It's a large building. And that also then creates space at Hale to start some construction, right? So if we're going to use the Hale site for the one comprehensive high school, we're going to need to get some kids on the way, so to speak, so that construction process can begin, because otherwise we're going to be limited to summers and it'll take forever to get this kind of project done. So that would be in the first year. It would also be the time to engage ninth graders and then the next year 10th graders in some of the things that happen when you launch a new school. So there's a new name, there's a new mascot, there's new colors. So all of those things that start to get people excited about the new opportunities. In year two, all 9th and 10th grade would be in the new school in the Central building, and there would still be 11th and 12th graders in the Legacy Central, right? So some of this is also allowing kids that started at Hale and Central to graduate from their initial high school if that's their desire, right? There's a point at which we could also see a model where kids might want to transfer to the new school before they finish graduating from Hale or Central. But the idea is the 9th and 10th grade, again, there's more opportunity for construction, so we keep the construction process going. And then in year 3, all 9th through 11th, right, would be moving to the new Hale. Right, so by then there's enough construction where we can fit more students over into the new version of Hale. I shouldn't say the new Hale, because the idea is Hale and Central both would phase down and eventually close. And then there would still be 12th graders at Hale, 12th graders at Central, again, if they want to kind of graduate from the high school they started in. And then in year 4, according to this kind of design, Hale and Central are officially closed with DPI, and all students are now in one high school. Some of the other pieces that come with this kind of transition are how do you kind of honor and capture kind of the history and the legacy of the former high schools. And there's not only is, I think, the opportunity to do that for Central and Hale, but also former West Milwaukee High School. And so in the final design and drawings, what we would create is essentially kind of a museum. So a place where you can capture the story of the athletics and the arts and the yearbooks. There's a tradition at Central, and even more so at Hale, of seniors painting murals, right? And all the kids sign. You hire a photographer to go in and capture all of those things so they can all be cataloged and put in the collection, so to speak, so that for generations, alumni can come and visit and find their murals in the collection. So it's a way to kind of preserve the history and put it in a cool space in the new facility that also kind of honors people's experiences. And I think we do the same with West Milwaukee High School, because that really doesn't have a place for people to visit anymore as a high school. And there are lots of kind of memorabilia kind of housed in places in the West Milwaukee building. And we have archives here and in other places. So that's a little bit of an example of how to kind of phase through the process that would kind of transition the 2 high schools into one, and honor the legacy, and also facilitate the opportunity for construction. So questions about that?
Are we anticipating issues with class size, staffing? Like, would we have to, what can Central hold this amount?
So last question first. Yes, Central can certainly hold it. It's a large building. And given the numbers, we could fit all of high school in Central. It would be tight right now. We wouldn't want to do that, but it could happen. So yes, if all of the students would fit during this transition, there would be no impact on class size unless we change our staffing ratios, right? And that really is a budget decision. We don't anticipate recommending changing staffing ratios, meaning number of staff per students. In high schools, it's all driven by English class choices, because every student takes English every single year, or an English course. Is how it kind of starts in high school and kind of plays out from there. So we would still have the same number of teachers with the number of kids we have, so we wouldn't necessarily lose teacher positions. The positions that are downsized are, we would only need 1 principal. We may have more assistant principals in a larger high school, but we only need 1 head secretary. We only need 1 head custodian. So that's where you start to get some of the cost savings coming from those kind of positions. But in terms of overall class size, I'm glad you asked the question, because that one does come up over and over from teachers. There's some assumption that larger school means larger class size, and that's not the case. That's all about staffing ratios and number of kids per teacher. Yeah.
Speaking to that and teachers, like, what is our plan? Because I think I heard at our last meeting that, getting teacher buy-in is really essential to the process. So how do we ease the fear that teachers may have that, you said the word downsizing. I mean, we're right sizing, but, I don't want teachers to feel like they're being looked over upon, and every little thing they're looking at is, oh, we're gonna get rid of you because, and we have this opportunity. I want no fear. I want them to understand. And how do we be transparent, communicate, and just completely open and honest with what's
Yep.
gonna happen.
No, great question. Talked quite a bit about it. So one of the things that we didn't do it last year with COVID, but Deidre and I have done traditionally is we do a round of visits to every single school. So we do a staff meeting in every school. And it really is kicking off the new year. It's a way to connect and we'll focus. There's two big focuses this year. One is the facility planning process and the other one is the new compensation law, right? Are the two pieces. So that's the first kind of level of engagement.
Small things.
Right, right, two small things in a staff meeting. But we'll also, we've talked also about some kind of open forum in a Zoom meeting so that, you know, we don't have to travel or teachers don't have to travel, so that more opportunities to answer questions. And I think as the communication around a survey rolls out, that also is going to include production of some short videos, because it's not only teachers that we need to really explain this to, but the larger community as well. But I think it's going to be ongoing with staff, because, right, that is a lesson from Bill Foster, is that if the staff aren't on board and if understand it and get excited about it, we're not going to be successful. But that's the plan at this point, through those individual school meetings that we'll visit, and then open kind of forums for teachers to engage and ask questions directly of us, and then the broader communication most likely through video.
Any other questions?
If there are no additional questions on the transition plan, we will shift into presentation on the options for a one comprehensive high school. So what we're going to share with you this evening is the base option, or option A, which we shared with you at our last meeting. So this is the single comprehensive high school at the Nathan Hale site. You have the site plan on the screen in front of you this evening. This basically wraps the entire existing Hale building with new construction and features some additional parking and site infrastructure. On the north side of the plan generally are the classrooms and learning communities. On the east side of the plan, or right side of this image, would be the STEM tech ed shop environments. On the southwest corner of the site plan generally would be the auditorium, band, choir, orchestra, rehearsal spaces. And then the angular piece coming off the southeast corner would be the gymnasium and pool spaces. So we can jump inside. I'll move somewhat quickly through this one only because we spent some time on it last time. Obviously more than happy to answer questions about this as we continue to go. So as a reminder, this plan keeps the majority of the Hale building, but makes a significant investment in the space, both through the lens of improving the space for teaching and learning by creating the learning communities that you can see generally, a series of classrooms, all having access to project-based learning environments or STEM or flexible lab spaces. That occurs both within the existing building, but also within the proposed new construction, which is in yellow on the plan. This would subtract or demolish the center spine of the school. So the current entry, small lobby, auditorium, band, choir, orchestra. It's got the variety of floor levels, kind of the steep pitch in the auditorium space. This base option A would really subtract that and demolish that entire space and rebuild cafeteria, library, and other spaces back into that same exact space. And then, as you can see, a 3-court gymnasium, 8-lane swimming pool on the northeast corner, and then the 800-seat auditorium with rehearsal spaces of orchestra, band, choir, etc., wrapping around that. So this is the base option A, as we had explored with you as the board at our last meeting. The next slide really is the second floor plan for that same plan. You can see here more learning communities or academic space on the second floor with the library in that center core above the cafeteria. What we tried to do for you here is itemize, and I'm surely not going to go through and read all these, but we itemized all the different scope or program that was included within each of the options. And what we're bringing to you tonight are gradients of investment, all still able to achieve a single comprehensive high school at the Hale site. So this, I think, as we joked a little bit at the last meeting, this is if the money fell out of the sky and we could fund everything all at once. This is kind of a long-range vision as to what could be built, option A. If we want to move to option B, I'm sorry, I'm going to hand it to Mark to go through the budget piece for option A.
Yeah, just a reminder on the budget from our last meeting. This building in total is a little over 550,000 square feet. And it's the complete gut and remodel of the existing building. So there's, it's all renovated and additions, and it came in at $180.2 million.
And Mark, before you jump to the next one, if we could just take a look at the CIP only cost, which lovingly is our do nothing cost. That's the cost of the current Nathan Hale site as it stands right now.
That was the combined Nathan Hale and Central,
Sorry. Nathan Hale.
just in this one instance. Which was the lower or left-hand corner of the budget slide there of 61.9 million.
As we move through, what we were trying to do, as I said earlier, is kind of give gradients of investment. Not sure where the board felt about a project of $180 million. Not sure how the community would feel about that investment, but wanting to give you a sense of what different scaled back versions of the plan could be that would still allow us, as I mentioned before, to transition to one comprehensive high school while protecting the ability to continue to make investments in the future at the single comprehensive site to eventually achieve the full long-term plan for what a single comprehensive high school could look like. So as you look at option B, the big difference here there's two major differences. We dug deeper, and the first option A really was a plan that had been conceived without finalizing the academic delivery and quantities of spaces. So we're able to here in option B achieve the same academic delivery goals in terms of quantity and types of spaces. Basically in option A, I think we just had too much space allocated for that academic piece. It would have been the perfect scenario where every teacher would have had a classroom every period of the day. They would have had, quote unquote, their classroom or lab. As we get to larger high schools like this, it's very, very common to treat classrooms, not everyone, because some are specialized, but many classrooms would be treated more where faculty and staff would have an office environment, and then they would be moving to the classroom for their direct education work. So that actually cuts down on the number of classrooms and labs that we need because we don't have a classroom or lab being idle or unused for direct educational purposes 2 to 3 periods a day, which we would have in that case. So long story short is this option B still achieves all of our academic goals in terms of a major investment in the current Hale building to reorganize, to create learning communities. We're still adding 2 floors worth of learning communities on the left side, which is the actual north side of the site of this plan. We're still removing and subtracting the main auditorium, band, choir, orchestra, and rebuilding the cafeteria in its place. You will see a slight shift here in that the office now comes to the west side or the bottom of the plan you have in front of you. That really is done because now we can achieve a drop-off pickup location and a small amount of parking where we previously in option A had building programmed for. We actually think this is a huge tweak. We weren't loving option A's plan where the office was so far away from the academics where the majority of the kids are throughout the day. So actually in a way, we think this is a good a change from option A to option B is getting that office more central. It still allows the large major field of parking to support your community events in the auditorium, the 2 existing gyms, or the 3-station gym. And you can see here that this plan remains the same in this case with the gymnasium, locker rooms, auditorium, band, choir, orchestra, but it simply leaves the pool as a future investment. So we're showing a dashed line where the pool could go in the future. So this is option B. Some might call this, if we were grading, option A- instead of A, because it's still a really great solution. It might just be a little more palatable in terms of overall investment. So again, a 2-story plan, all of our tech ed, STEM, shop spaces stacked on the top, which is the east side of the plan, really deferring the investment in a new swimming pool in this case to a potential future phase. Mark, I'll hand it back to you.
Right, so in this scenario, the square footage is down. As Matt had mentioned, there's no pool on this one. That's what's really driving the savings off the previous one. There is some existing to remain space, so we're not renovating every square inch of the program in this scenario. And so this one, the CIP cost is the same as the previous one. That'll be consistent for all the high school options here, or the do nothing at 61.9 million. But this option is drawn is $172.8 million, really driven by the lack of the pool. Or I shouldn't say the lack, but the future phase of adding a pool on there. Is why that came down. Yes.
It seems to me that there's a lot more different than just not having a pool. You don't have the STEAM classroom, as you mentioned, you move the entrance into the middle because you lose that square footage for the STEAM. This area here is not on this drawing here. And you also, instead of having wrestling on that same area on the top half of north of the gymnasium, it's now servery kitchen stuff. So there's less wrestling space, it appears. And then for the second story too, there's, that the library isn't there. I'm sorry, library is shifted. Yeah, so before it was open to below, and now that's a library space on the second floor versus the library space being over to the right of that open to below gray area. So I understand what you're saying. Yes, there's not a pool, but there's also not a lot of other stuff too in this option that I think is important to make note, because it's not just not having a pool. It's also not having classroom spaces and seemingly losing some other athletic spaces as well besides the pool. I presume in this instance, if we didn't have a pool, we would have to use the central pool for any related things.
Great point, Noah. In this case, the central pool would,
Because we're demolishing the Hale pool to build this. So our only pool, well, we have FLW's pool and we also have West Milwaukee's pool, but I'm not sure if those are large enough for the sorts of competition that we'd be having.
no, and I think you're on the right track with the pool piece specifically, and whether we remain at the central, or if the board is interested in B as the pathway, we probably want to look at a B1, which would actually add the weight fitness center potentially at the back, like you're going to see in a little while, and maybe we keep the pool intact in this initial phase and simply add it later and repurpose. So I think there might be a small tweak to B, and it actually, I think is a great observation. That's a potential tweak to B if we go that route. So the final option this evening for the one comprehensive high school at the Hale site is an option C. And this is really looking at keeping as much as possible the existing Hale building intact with some investment in the capital improvement needs of the building, since we're going to be keeping the majority of the space intact. We will be, you can see the site plan generally stays the same, reserving space for the future music and performing arts and keeping space for the future pool. But when we look at the floor plans for this, the big change is that we don't remove the center section, which I've referenced a couple times, of being the auditorium, band, choir, orchestra. We keep that intact in this phase to continue serving one comprehensive high school with those amenities. And as we go to the next floor plans, we make less investment in the existing Hale academic spaces, and we generally keep them intact. Now, a couple of exceptions there. The office, we wouldn't want the office to be so central, right, tucked deep into the building. So when we build a new office, we would be remodeling the current office space on the left side of the existing building to become classroom or lab space. The cafeteria, if you recall, on what is the northeast corner of the building, the upper left-hand corner of the existing plan on the slide. The cafeteria sticks out there, so there'd be some redoing of that as we'd be moving where the cafeteria is located. Then the rest of the renovations generally are focused on some of the tech ed STEM current shop spaces would become locker rooms and storage. We would shift the kitchen servery, and we would really expand the what was going to be the event lobby only on the south side or the right side of the plan to become your cafeteria. It would also serve as the lobby today for the gymnasium, and the lobby in the future for an auditorium when it's added. But this actually, Noah, to your point earlier, this does suggest where the pool could remain intact, and we would simply build a new weight fitness on the top of this plan, which would be the east side of the actual plan. This option C conceives of just that, whereby the pool could remain. So this again is kind of a base option. When we are remodeling the existing Hale building in both B and C, we're actually reducing the quantity of classroom and lab spaces quite significantly within there through the renovation. It's through right sizing rooms, it's through getting those central light courts carved in that will bring natural light deeper into the spaces. And so we lose academic space by doing that. In this case, we're not proposing to do that. And in turn, we have the ability to take 2 floors worth of classrooms on the north end and turn them into a future phase. So the future phase in this case would theoretically be renovation of the current academic wing, academic core of the Hale building to create the learning communities. It would involve adding 2 stories of classrooms on the north end of the school, and then some version of demolishing the center core and building the new band, choir, orchestra spaces and or pool. And those could be 1 phase or they could be 4 separate phases. It'll really depend on future planning. But this again was really looked at almost exclusively through the lens of what would it take to get our academic space needs met at the Hale site for one comprehensive high school, while making some investments to begin down the path of a master plan, but more looking at it through the lens of what's the minimal investment we need to make to get to one comprehensive high school. As with all of these, please look at them as starting points for tweaking and navigating a final solution. If you as a board are gravitating towards A, B, or C tonight, there's surely going to be tweaks and revisions that can be made and should be made because they're just concepts. They look way too done when they're drawn on a computer, at which they were still hand sketched. But the goal tonight was to give you options, give you gradients, and give you some sense of what different levels of investment could be to begin us down the path towards one comprehensive high school.
All right, from a cost standpoint, this option C is 470,000 square feet. And you can see the top part of that is 208,000 square feet of existing to remain. So we're, as Matt mentioned, that would be a future phase. That's what helps bring the cost down. There's a little bit of interior remodeling. It's 18,000 square feet. Those other options had us doing a lot of gutting and remodeling. So this is really limiting what's going on the inside of the building from a cost standpoint. So this option is shown is 122.7 million. There you go.
Mark, can you touch on roughly what dollars or capital improvement assumptions you've made because we are keeping so much more of the existing Hale building in this case?
Sorry, Matt, we had you on mute there for a second. Can you repeat that?
Yep, no, I was just saying, could you touch a little bit on how much, since we're keeping so much more of the existing Hale, what assumptions are built into the $122 million number for capital improvements to the current building?
That's a good question because there is so much of the building, the 208,000 square feet that is remaining. The CIP portion of this is higher. It's $22.1 million. So we looked at the initial CIP that we had for this site for Hale, and we said, if we're not touching any of that, what CIP items are still valid, we want to make sure are included in the budget. So roof items, site items, mechanical items, etc. Some of the ADA issues. And so that is included, the $22.1 million of CIP costs is included in this analysis. In the other versions, because it's so much of a gut and remodel, there's maybe zero or very limited amount of CIP costs because of we're renovating so much.
The goal, again, those are the three gradients of investment at the single comprehensive high school at the Hale site. And we'll turn it, Noah, back to you and the board for discussion or questions you might have on the concepts shared this evening.
All right, any questions or discussions you guys want to do about those three options? Jane?
Just clarifying questions. Please bear with me because just a couple of things that I'm just confused about, and I'm going to go on a limb because I don't understand. So when we're talking about the initial, the taxpayers would pay based on their homes, and is that like until we get it all paid off? How many years in a row would we be paying that amount of money?
Yep. So the way that the numbers have been calculated right now is based on a 20-year.
20 years.
The one that's a conservative, the numbers used are conservative. So it's off the record, those are subject to change regardless. But as we normally do, we budget conservatively. So 20 years. And what's common and normal is when you have debt, you're often refinancing debt.
Mhm.
So based on, the debt structure, and if we say move to another phase, we've paid off X dollars so far, we can restructure, refinance so that a mill rate could stay the same or the tax impact could stay the same, but maybe we pay more 1 year and less in another year because we can restructure that debt.
Okay.
The way it's currently calculated is based on a 20-year.
20 year. Okay.
And not a dumb question at all.
I-
These are
I'm
all new
just-
things to us, so ask all the questions.
Yeah, and then the other thing that, I'm just curious about, okay, so $180 million, it sounds like a lot of money. It obviously is a ton of money, right? Okay. So are there you always talk about buckets and you talk about how, we can get money from different, so is that, we don't have any money is what you're saying. Like, what about the $60 million we would need for CIP? Like, we would have to pay that, right? We'll have to keep our buildings going. So do we have any of that money to do that if we would decide not to do anything? I mean, if we don't have to pay that, then don't we have that money towards it?
So that's a really good question. So we've seen in our numbers, $248 million are the CIP needs for all of our buildings.
Right.
And we have in our budget $1.2 million each year
Oh,
for those CIP costs.
Okay.
So that kind of brings us back down to reality of that's 220 years that just to keep our buildings going as they are right now. So the goal of these plans is, in addition to all the super awesome academic pieces, is to extend the life of our buildings. So we have to invest in them in order to do that.
okay.
So there is no separate existing dollars, and that's why we're at this stage where we're at to create a long-range facilities master plan
Okay.
and look to our community.
So then as we roll this out to the public, there are lots of different ways that we can look at it. One of them is, we want to attract families and we want to offer them, something that is going to bring families into the district. And so of course, then I'd be like, well, then we can't not have a pool because of that, but on the other hand, if we're talking about being honest and transparent with community and families, it really doesn't have anything to do with that. We're in a place where we have to do it. I don't think we have a choice. So, and I'm just trying to this is what's going on around in my head. What we say, from what I'm hearing, we don't have that many options. We have to do something. Correct? I mean,
Yeah.
So,
This is a long time coming.
okay. 'Cause
This
I
is
feel-
years and years
yeah.
and years of us
Yeah,
just kind of keeping things along, and we haven't had
Right.
any major changes to our buildings in some
Right.
time. And so
yeah,
it's a combination of us looking at our declining enrollment and seeing what is needed from that perspective, from an
Mhm.
enrollment perspective, how much space we actually need, but then also bring our buildings up to 21st century learning. So we can actually give the opportunities to our students that they deserve.
right. And so, kind of what you were saying, Noah, last time that, it's not a matter of, are we gonna vote to close some elementary school? Like, we're gonna need to do that, right? So we're not really saying, are we deciding on one high school? We're pretty much gonna go to one high school. It's just a matter of what that might look like, right? Is that what
Well,
we're
it's still a
saying?
decision. It's still a decision that we make as a board,
Okay.
whether we're gonna go to one high school or not. This
Okay,
is the thing that the fact committee has come up with as their recommendation.
right, right.
And what we're learning about here is the options that we could go with that. If we as a board said, no, we don't want to do one high school, we want to do two, well, that'd be the direction that we would go. But,
Okay.
and this is just the information that we have right now, and that we're just kind of, at this point, trying to talk through what survey questions is where the next big thing. Because what we need to know, we're looking at big numbers, as you mentioned. We need to know what could be supported by our community in regards to that, because we don't want to put a referendum out there that says, oh, we want this many dollars, and it was nowhere close to what they would even support.
Right.
So that's really gonna be a big, thing for us, is getting that information, because that will kind of give us the direction we need to know, is like, how big of a project can we even consider?
Okay.
Because without the community support, it's dead in the water anyways.
I have kind of question up. So let's say we go to our, the community and they say, the most we were willing to pay for is our CIP. Are we able to have all, still go down to one high school if we can't secure, even option C? I mean, with the current stuff, if we just,
I think it'd be very difficult. I think you could probably, you're running Hale at what? 1,600, 1,700 at one point. So I could envision where you could go to one comprehensive high school and you might have 2 or 3 Dunkies. So you might have a couple other small high school options, is another way to think about it. And that would also generate some cost savings. So we're not running 2 large buildings. Yeah, I think those are interesting kind of hypothetical questions, because we may learn that we'll help you, the community say, we'll help you maintain the building so they last another 50 years, as long as you get down to the fewest number of buildings that you need, and you got to figure out the rest. And hopefully that's not the answer we get, but it's possible. So that's a little bit of a scenario I played with in my mind. If we still wanted to go to one, then where do you put the other 300-400 kids? And you envision a couple other small high schools.
Other questions or comments, Bill?
I'm assuming our single family income homes average is roughly 135, 140,000. What the average in our?
I don't have that. I can dig into that, but I don't have it off the top of my head.
I mean, because clearly that's going to be the group that we're going to have to focus a lot of attention on. And so, I mean, in sales, the big thing is breaking it down to cost per day. And I think if we broke down $187 by 12 months, I think that's $16 a month divided by 30 days is 55 cents a day. And when people hear 55 cents a day,
Yep, we can, absolutely, we can run those
Sounds
numbers in
like-
any way, shape or form.
a
Yeah.
message
Yep.
that I receive. I don't hear 180 million when I hear 55 cents a day
Mhm.
if I want a $100,000 home.
Yep.
So,
Mhm.
I mean,
Good point.
I think as I'm evaluating, my biggest struggle is, and it kind of goes back to one of the things that Jane was saying, is that, if we're going to do something, it's important to consider kind of the draw for other individuals to the community, and kind of having something to be proud of and to celebrate. Which I guess the challenge for me is then that kind of automatically goes to option A, because I think that kind of does some of those things. And I think the way West Dallas is growing and the way West Dallas is moving forward, I think that could potentially be another big piece to where we're heading.
I just have one more question for Caitlin. How does the fluctuating values of our home, how does that affect like in a referendum? So like right now, my home's being assessed a lot more than what I paid for it. So how does that affect in terms
Yep.
of if we took out a 20-year, how does?
So, yep, okay, so the mill rate, you take your equalized value of your home times the mill rate, which gets you ultimately the
dollar amount that you pay for the school district portion of your property taxes. So if your home is fluctuating in equalized value, which is slightly different than assessed value, but for the sake of the example, similar, then that tax impact is going to change as your home fluctuates. So if which is why we often say your tax bill, even if our mill rate is decreasing, could go up if the value of your home goes up. But the math problem stays the same. The formula stays the same. And ultimately, the value of our homes going up is a good thing for our community. I mean, if you look at a property tax bill and it's like, okay, it went up, but ultimately that's a good thing for our community.
Right, the negative is like when it was happening a couple years ago, where our tax bill was going up, where our values were going down. Now at least you don't have that problem, which is, a good thing in the long run if people look at it from that perspective, but not everyone will. They'll look at the long run of what they have to pay for their taxes, and that's what they'll focus on.
Well, and I would argue that if we choose the right option, that's going to help property values continue to grow. So.
Yeah, I have a hard time believing that if we build a brand new high school,
Exactly.
that people won't want to come to the district. I
Yeah.
just don't think that they'll be like, I don't know. If we have a state-of-the-art facility. So I think that definitely would be a draw for families who are looking at places to live. Combined with the city of West Allis, anyways, efforts to revitalize themselves. I think that's a good combination if that is supported.
Yeah, it's, if you're watching news, it's precisely the debate lacrosse is having, right? So they're talking about consolidating two current high schools into one, but building from the ground up, one brand new. And that's exactly part of the argument they're making, is that this will attract, but they're talking about 3,000 students in one building. But it's really about attracting families to the new, modern, so the same kind of concept.
An interesting note too, next near the rec center, there's a home for sale, and on their listing, one of the pros about the area is the new state-of-the-art rec center located in the same neighborhood. So just kind of neat. I mean, that's
awesome.
yeah,
It's really- it's
absolutely.
great.
Yeah.
I've actually seen a couple where people are advertising that we have all day 4K for homes that are around schools in our district. So I think that's very cool.
How we sell the referendum, the potential referendum, and what are our plans to tell our story for the survey, or our intentions to find out from the survey and then tell our story? How are we telling our story via video? What's the pro list? What value of having a brand new high school brings to the community? Attracting families, better learning spaces, better relationships with community businesses, better co-curricular opportunities, all that sort of stuff. We have a promotional piece that we are putting together. About we decide to go. How quickly are we ready to?
We've talked, there's planning in place, right? We've talked about this with Bill Foster, and just not only is it the piece that he'll send out, which is the main communication piece for the vast majority of residents, but there's also an information campaign with videos and those kind of things. And we'll do some open community meetings with a presentation, but but in Bill's experience, and I won't speak for Bill, but I think I remember him saying it, it's really the document that gets sent in the mail that's your main communication tool around this. Is that you can have as many community meetings as you want. You're not going to get, we're not going to get 1% of the residents to show up to those. So it really is what goes in the mail is the critical piece.
So for the survey part, we're not really doing anything ahead of time other than maybe communicating that, hey, a survey was going to come out regarding options for facilities in the school. Please keep an eye out for that sort of thing.
Right.
It's not much more story than that. I think that's what you're trying to ask, Bill.
Yeah. And it really is getting the staff to understand. So that campaign gets to be, I think, more important as a front load to the survey, because teachers in particular will get a lot of questions from parents. And so that if teachers are saying, oh yeah, this made a lot of sense and I understand it, yeah, we're asking people to support it, that's the message we want staff to carry.
Did a comment from that. I'm gonna unmute him.
Oh,
here,
sorry.
so we don't-
No, sorry about that. The other piece, I think, and it works in many cases, we'll probably use the survey to offer a couple of open houses or listening sessions for those that are on the fence and not sure while taking the survey, to have the opportunity to come in and get questions answered. If the survey results come back supportive and the board elects to proceed with the referendum, there would be a robust communications and community engagement campaign generally from January through that first week of April in 2022. But at this point, it's still about putting out a survey that presents the facts. I think the board's preference in terms of, you're not going to survey about something you're not supportive of. So I think it's inferred by even surveying a specific option or two that you are supportive of this generally. But the survey will not be a piece that is attempting to sway people. It's a fact-based document that is looking to collect data, which will be critical to you as a board making a decision on how to proceed.
I have one question. The differences between options A and B, one thing that was mentioned is that it reduces you felt that option A actually had too much space for learning environments. Is that correct? We were like over. Go ahead. You can.
Okay, I'll unmute him. Go ahead, Matt.
All right. Yes. So when we really looked, so educational delivery in terms of a high school, especially when we get to larger high schools, 1,800 to 2,000 students, and we have 60 classrooms and labs, let's say. If every classroom or lab is not being used for direct instruction of a student 2 to 3 class periods a day, depending on the subject, depending on the schedule makeup, we end up creating a relatively inefficient utilization ratio of the overall building academic spaces. So we're building far more classrooms and labs than we may need to deliver the same education. The difference is we have to create office environments. So we're trading by creating faculty collaboration and office space. That's an investment, no doubt, to create that. But that is a smaller investment to create that space and save on the quantity of classroom and labs that we have to create. So that was one piece of the shift from A to B, was making that move. The other was honestly just a lot more detailed work with the district's educational leadership team to really kind of refine down to exact quantities. We're doing 2,000 student high schools, one in Sun Prairie, one in Neenah right now. So we have a really good grasp on what generally a 2,000 student high school needs in terms of quantities. It has to be obviously corrected for how West Southwest Milwaukee is going to deliver education, which is what we've gone through. But we feel confident that either A or B, slightly different in terms of how the educators would interact with those spaces, are going to give you great teaching and learning environments for our target of around 2,000 students.
Is this like the way the education is going as far as having shared spaces like this versus each teacher having their own classroom, which I mean our staff is used to at this point?
Yes, I think that's been true for quite a while. I mean, when I taught at Vincent High School, there were it was departmentalized, not in learning communities, which is a different concept, but there was a social studies corridor wing. And so I was a social studies teacher and I had a desk in the social studies office. And so we all came and went from the social studies office and I would change classrooms 2-3 times a day.
I have a clarification question. So the 61.9 million for CIP, that's for both Central and Hale, correct?
Correct.
So not to beat on a hypothetical too much, but if we were to get to a situation where the public only supported CIP costs, and again, we still wanted to try to go to one school, there would be additional costs there to kind of reconfigure some of those other buildings potentially to have the right learning environment for that situation as well, correct?
Correct.
And I don't think we'd be getting that learning. I mean, the CIP cost was just to make the building go. It's not making any of the learning spaces any better.
No, I know, that's, yeah.
I mean, that's the other thing I think it's very important. This just keeps the walls up and the roof not leaking in the temperature, the right temperature. It doesn't make it a 21st century learning environment for anyone.
You know, again, if we're looking at an option A and option B, you're talking about 6 cents a day.
Yeah.
So to me,
For me, the cost difference is not, I don't want to say nothing, it's $8 million, but
right,
what you lose between the two, I think is a lot, between the pool and that extra space that you have for actually doing education work.
Right.
To me, that's a big difference. When you're looking at an overall cost of $108 million or $172 million, I think if I was looking at it, I'd be like, well, I mean, if I'm spending 180 or I'm spending 172 million, does it really matter that much when you're talking those big numbers? And I think that what you lose on the other end is worse, because without the pool, yeah, then we're going to Central or doing something at FLW that might reduce opportunities for hosting things, because there might be upgrades we have to do at Central to make sure that pool's up to snuff, if that's the only one we got now. So I don't know, for me anyways, if that would be the right route to go for the small difference in cost. I understand these are very high up there and not, detail at this point. But, looking at A and B, I'm like, whatever. It's really, to me, it's A or C. To me, that's what it's A or C when you're looking at the differences. Because then you're talking an actual large amount of money difference between the two. Jeff?
I like the A, and if we have extra educational space, that's great. Maybe in 5 years, we want to go to an 812 building. Now we've got space for it. I would hate to have us bite off our nose to spite our face. Oh, I saved some bucks here, which in the long run is going to cost us more money because it may not be the right decision at the time. And to go without the pool, that's the first thing that would, red flag.
Yeah. Same.
As the mother of a potential Olympic champion of swimming. No. But it is a big draw for our family to have those pools because, that is something our family's invested in. And I know a lot of our swimming and diving at Hale is pretty phenomenal. So that's something I just want to throw my hat in the ring there.
And the fathers that be, back when they built Hale in 1940, the pool was put off. They weren't going to put it in, and they didn't. And it stayed that way till Central moved in there and they remodeled the whole field house and got their pool. So, just because it's in the future doesn't mean it's going to appear.
And I'd also remind people that the pool is just not for recreation. I mean, that's how I got out of gym class. I took aquatics and lifeguarding. So there are other, pools also provide part of our curriculum. We've had kids, remember when they made those cardboard boats and then they went to FLW and floated it. So I mean, the pool is not just a draw in terms of our, just in terms of just our dive teams and athletics and stuff in our community, but it actually is a vital part of some of our curriculum
It's a
too.
fire teaching station.
Exactly.
I think, if we view it through the lens of this could be this, obviously it's not in the center because it's on the west end of town, but this is a space, would be a space that the community as a whole can be proud of, and not just, half the people over here and half the people over here. So think about, the arts and having musicals and drawing the community out and that sort of thing, and all the other things that comes with it, not just the educational part of it. That's going to be amazing too. So
You made me think of something else. How much does the current auditorium seat at Hale? Not sure. I gotta imagine it's under the 800 that the new auditorium would hold.
I don't know, Mark, if you can hear me or not.
Yep.
I don't know the exact number, and Steve, I don't know if you could want to weigh in. If I had to guess from spending a few meetings in there, I'm thinking it's around 650-ish. It might be more than that, but there's no doubt. All right, so Deidre just put in the chat, she thinks around 600 and it's tight. So I think that 600-ish number is about the right number from what I could sense from being in the space a few times.
I think that's
So-
pretty close, because when we have our opening day meetings there, every seat is taken and people are sitting on the steps and they're sitting in the commons. It doesn't accommodate our staff.
Yeah, so I can't imagine housing 2 schools on that site and having that small of an auditorium. That would be a concern.
And, you know, considering our location and where we are, I mean, we would be a draw to regional activities and events and sporting events and, you know, and now we can center on and showcase, you know, our city and our community. And having this wonderful opportunity would really shine a light on us in a positive way.
We do have a second part here about the intermediate school. So does anyone else have any questions or comments regarding the high school options that we have? If not, I think we will move on.
All right, we'll jump into intermediate schools and a little bit of foreshadowing as to why the gradients was, and we're going to get to the end of tonight, which is really discussing what the board is interested in surveying the community on, was we just weren't sure, and we still aren't sure where your heads are at in terms of what types of options you'd like to survey the community. So we wanted to provide you with some gradients of investment. And at the end of tonight, we're going to ask you to help us kind of build the survey strategy by weighing in on what combination of projects or projects you're interested in. So very similar to what we just did with the single comprehensive high school is looking at a couple gradients, just 2, an A and a B in this case, for potential investment at Frank Lloyd Wright and West Milwaukee. So Frank Lloyd Wright Intermediate should be the option that we reviewed last meeting. So this is kind of the full comprehensive master plan solution. The vast majority of the building gets remodeled. We're adding an auditorium in the southeast corner, the upper right-hand corner of this plan. We're adding new band, choir, and orchestra and music spaces on the southwest corner or lower right-hand corner of this plan. And then creating 5 learning communities or houses at a middle school level, split between the 2 floors. But really a very extensive renovation, almost every square foot of existing space, with the exception of pool, locker rooms, and a few other little ones, receiving major overhauls. So that's the base option. Option A really was a pretty exhaustive renovation of the existing building, along with the additions for the auditorium, band, choir, and orchestra.
From a square footage and budget standpoint, in option A, the total square footage was 205,000 square feet. There was a little bit of existing to remain, 30,000 square feet in there. You can see there's a lot of renovation, 146,000 square feet. And that all boils down to cost of $52.3 million. If you look in the upper left-hand corner, just for reference, the CIP cost for Frank Lloyd Wright was $20.5 million as presented last time.
As we move through to option B, and you probably get the sense from the work we did at the high school, it really is keeping kind of the master plan scenario intact, but scaling back the investment. In this case, we would move the addition of the auditorium to become a future phase. We would still construct a new addition for band, choir, orchestra, and music spaces on the southwest corner. We would still do an extensive renovation on the first floor for cafeteria, gymnasium, secure entry and office, and one of our academic houses. It's a slightly lighter touch. We didn't touch every room in a major renovation way, which is why you'll see in a little bit why the CIP dollars went up slightly compared to option A. There's a little more space left in gray, but still achieving the same academic delivery goals. And then as we step upstairs, a different look, again, just a slightly lighter touch in terms of quantity of square footage renovated, in option B, to try to give you a potentially slightly smaller investment to still achieve our goal of 5 academic houses, our investment in STEM tech ed shop environments, and our focus on band, choir, and orchestra.
So in this option B, the square footage is reduced to 190,000 square feet. There's about a third less renovation in this option versus option A. And it results in a lower price of $43.6 million. Because there is, you kind of looked at with the high school option, we went from A to C. Since there is more of existing to remain here, the CIP cost for this one went up a little bit versus option A because it's existing space. We still want to address some of those items that are need to be addressed with ADA and HVAC and some of the other things that were identified on the CIP. Jane, you had a question in option A.
I was just curious with the Frank Lloyd Wright building, you know, it's designed like a Frank Lloyd Wright design, and it doesn't have any windows. And I've always wondered about that. And obviously this is a remodel and not a, you know, from the ground up, but that wouldn't be a part of it, putting in any windows or any skylights or anything.
There are in option A.
Is there?
In both options, we're addressing the exterior. There are extra windows or additional windows that are being brought into that each scenario to bring daylight into the building.
Okay.
And I believe option A, we had skylights.
Yeah, the library has a
Okay,
skylight for
okay,
sure.
good. I'm just checking. I'm just, boy, if we're gonna do that one,
That was
that makes
definitely
a lot of sense.
a priority from a design standpoint to get light in the building. We included that in the budget.
Okay. And then is this happening in a different phase or simultaneously to the high school?
Oh, that's part of our
That's
activity.
for us.
later.
That's what we're.
That's for us to
Yeah.
decide.
So what we're doing right now is going through kind of all the different options that we have. And you'll have a chart in front of you that the big chart also behind Stephen Mark over here, that we're gonna kind of explore each package that we could move forward with in a survey.
Got it.
So right now, we're just going through all the different options, and then we're gonna chunk them and kind of talk through those.
So moving to West Milwaukee, great questions on Frank Lloyd Wright and natural light. That is a high priority. And I know the district team has been cognizant of wanting to make sure we can get as much natural light into that building as possible. So West Milwaukee Intermediate is one we haven't looked at in detail. So I'll spend just a few more minutes on this as a base option. So the first plan really looked at a major addition to the north. And those of you that know this building, it's a complicated series of levels. We've got a main floor, first floor, second floor, or lower first, second, however you think about it. But we generally have 3 floors of building in the case of West Milwaukee. In this case, we would be adding to the north a large addition that includes the secure entry and office. It includes our band, choir, orchestra, music spaces, includes some new tech ed or STEM spaces within that addition. We would keep intact on the lower level, the cafeteria, the kitchen, the pool, and a series of those support spaces that would be remaining in the lower level of the school. And we would remodel on the south side or the main face of the building for some new art rooms. As we move up a floor, so on now what is first floor of the school, sticking with the addition, we would be adding a 2-court gymnasium, an event lobby or upper lobby space there, some storage for the gym, locker rooms to support the school. So that's a big need here in terms of just getting equitable gym space to Frank Lloyd Wright would be, in this case, we have to build new. And then we'd be able to remodel the existing first floor to create, just as we were doing at Frank Lloyd Wright, our academic houses of classrooms and STEM or science lab spaces to support the students teaching and learning. And in this case, we would have a library added on the first floor through renovation, which would have a skylight, which is noted on the plan. The auditorium would remain intact. So obviously a historic great feature of the school would remain in its current position. And then on the second floor, the addition's a lot cleaner, just some support mezzanines for mechanical equipment and other things. And then a similar relatively extensive renovation as we undertook on the first floor to create additional houses, including science labs, classrooms, and things to support our day-to-day teaching and learning needs. So that, just like Frank Lloyd Wright, is, as you could see, maybe a little bit lighter touch on our lower floor because there's a lot of support spaces down there that would remain, but similar in terms of an intensity of renovation as we move from first floor to second floor. So West Milwaukee option A, budget. Mark, I'll turn it to you.
So the, what's interesting and intended in this scenario is that it's very similar in square footage to what Frank Lloyd Wright option A is, and very similar when we see option B, they're within a couple thousand square feet of each other. So the buildings end up being very similar in size. In this, so it's 207,000 square feet. There is a similar amount of existing to remain to Frank Lloyd Wright. There's just, and then there's about 118,000 square feet of renovation here. There's a little bit more of a heavy remodel on the interior of Frank Lloyd Wright versus West Milwaukee if you're comparing the two, but the price for this is $49.1 million for West Milwaukee option A. The CIP cost for reference for this school is lower. It's $9.4 million, just for reference.
So again, as we move then to West Milwaukee option B, the addition would still be to the north on the plan. So we remain with the general approach of adding to the north. In this case, we would have a slightly smaller, lower floor plan addition, which would still include our secure entrance office and student services. But here we would not be adding our tech ed STEM spaces. We would only be adding band, choir, and orchestra would be created through renovation. The wood shop and other tech ed spaces would be existing spaces on the lower level with some renovation adjacent to it. So programmatically, we're still in the same place. It's just a slightly different way to get to that solution. Art rooms would still be present on the south face or main face. Cafeteria and pool would remain on the lower level. And then as we move up to our first floor and second floor, as you can see, the first floor of the gymnasium would remain a 2-court gymnasium, slightly different configuration, but same goal of providing 2 courts or 2 gymnasium spaces. A less intense renovation than on both first floor and second floor. CIP, you'll see, will likely be a higher number, but again, trying to provide a lighter touch while still making a major investment in West Milwaukee Intermediate in an option B scenario.
Right, from an overall square foot standpoint, this is 192,000 square feet. There's about between option A and option B, there's half the amount of renovation in option B, plus we're not doing as much of an addition. So the overall cost for this scenario is 41, or option I should say, is $41.6 million for option B.
So again, an $8 million difference. Question and comments from the board for this? Guess we have none.
So with that, I think I'll turn it back to Dr. Lexman, Steve, and Caitlin.
Sorry. And it's actually kind of about both of them with all of the plans that we have. More thinking the long term. And for things like option A's in both the plan specs, we're expecting longevity out of these buildings. We're expecting them to last us for quite some time. Is there flexibility built into the designs so that as educational needs change, that sometime down the road, there's the ability to alter these and still alter them minimally? So we don't have to go back and ask for a giant amount of money to accommodate our needs at a later date. Like, what kind of flexibility to shift do we have with these designs?
Go ahead, Matt.
All right, great question on flexibility. So there's 2 kind of components of flexibility that we always want to look at. One is how flexible is our architectural solution, our floor plan, to support evolutions in teaching and learning. And one of the biggest inhibitors to flexibility has been traditionally the science labs. We've historically created science departments where you stack 12 science labs down a hallway. And that really locks you in. You can change a classroom to serve as math or English or social studies or world language relatively easily. But it really is that science piece that locks us into kind of how we deliver education. And so the plan, as you see in front of you, especially option A, really looks at spreading that science out. So science in this case would be spread generally throughout the school, which would provide you with a lot of long-term flexibility. If you envision in 20 years going to a 9th grade academy where all 9th grade students are housed within one general area of the school for that transition year, and then they move into the school. No reason that in the plan as proposed, you couldn't easily do that by grabbing a few learning communities and creating that academy. So we were very intentional, and the district's leadership team has been very direct that educational flexibility is critical to any solution. The other piece is flexibility in terms of how we build buildings. Traditionally, schools have been built as concrete block walls that are indestructible, and they're great. They're very durable. They're good to do with hallways. But a lot of times we're seeing a move, especially over the last 5 years, to something called abuse-resistant drywall. So it's a drywall product that is actually has a slightly stronger capability to hold up to day-to-day use in a school environment. And that in and of itself provides you with a lot of flexibility in the future to add a door, move a wall. So going away from these concrete block walls that are carrying structure for upper floors and going to more of a steel frame or some combination of those two that gives you flexibility if you ever need to remodel in the future. So that's one tiny example on the building side. There's going to be a bunch of others when it comes to technology and where data is and all of that we can surely get into. But we want to make sure that the flexibility is viewed through both lenses of teaching and learning and construction.
Okay, thank you. And then since you brought it up with the science buildings or the science labs, oftentimes those were done to facilitate the vent needs for fume hoods and other things for the science labs and for the chemical storage and whatnot. By spreading them out in different areas, is there a localized chemical storage, or is this going to greatly expand the needs for ventilation capable rooms for storage?
So great question. I think sharing of resources is always a consideration, right? We don't want to duplicate 16 chemical storage rooms across the building. So we're likely going to work on consolidating where maybe our upper level chemical demands are in an area of the school on a same floor, and some of our other needs might be a floor below or on another wing. So we're still going to create some general adjacencies. We may end up backing up 2 labs with some spaces in between, and those labs are supporting different learning communities. So that's all still to be worked out. We can't share ventilation anymore when it comes to venting fume hoods and things like that. So every hood will have its own, I'll say basically direct exhaust to the outside regardless. We often would try to put those on the 2nd floor so that our run is not as far to go to a ceiling. So there's some little things that we'll work on. But there potentially will be some sharing of resources, but we try to minimize those through the detailed planning process.
Then the last question I had for the moment was, with the details that you have, and you say they look finished and all that, I assume this is accounted for, but while you have notations for stairs for the 1st floor to the 2nd floor, I'm not seeing any spots for elevators. Those are,
yeah, elevators, if they're not shown as little X's on the plan, we would definitely have them in the budget and would be accommodated. I'm trying to quickly skim and see if I can recall where we had them. We will have them. They would be assumed in the budget. If we build an auditorium, there will be an elevator to the orchestra pit. Every floor level will have an elevator to it. So in this case, the 2 floors on the academic side. And if we don't have a connection, we likely will also have an elevator up to the 2nd floor mezzanine spaces. We got rid of those in the plan, so I don't even have to bring those up. So the short answer is yes, there are elevators in the budget. We don't have them shown, but the scale of them are really small at this level, and we can easily fit them in the square footage we have.
all right, thank you.
Any other questions or comments?
I'm just gonna add, Hale Auditorium, Matt Lester message, and so there's about 750 seats in that Hale Auditorium.
New one's gonna have 800, is that what you said? Yeah. The new one has 800 seats. That would
Approximately 800, yes.
not terribly different. For combined high schools, that standard.
800 is pretty common. When we get past 800, we actually have to start talking about a balcony, which brings into a whole nother set of complications. Because 800 is about as far away as we want our back row to be from the stage with proper widths and depths before you can stop, a typical person can stop seeing the facial expressions of the performers. So it's kind of an 800, and then we take a pretty significant leap forward in cost. We've also generally found that the vast majority of performances don't draw more than 800. And if you're putting on a very popular musical or play, a lot of high schools have the philosophy that it's fine, we'll just do it again. It's one more chance for an understudy or for the performers to simply put on one extra performance. So not saying it's right or wrong, that's been the general philosophy that many of our high school clients have gone to. Because of the cost of going to a larger space. And also any all-school event where you would want to seat more than that. In your case, we've got 3 gymnasiums, right, in these options. We can easily not impact the Phi Ed schedule and use a gymnasium for something if we need more than 800 students and staff to be seated.
Any other questions? Comments? Next step. Survey options.
Okay, so here with the survey options, you should have 11 by 17 sheet of paper in front of you that shows exactly what's on this screen. And there's also a bigger version behind myself or behind me. And as you can see, if you look on the far left-hand side, the column says survey scenarios. And so there's 9 scenarios that are listed there. And then moving over to the right, there's one comprehensive high school, but you'll see under that is option A, B, and C. And for each of those options, there are 3 different scenarios. And the reason is because when you move over to the intermediate schools, for example, you could, when you're looking at what your first preference, second preference, third preference is, you could, for example, say that, well, I like one comprehensive high school, I like option A, but I really don't want to do anything to the intermediate schools right now. So then your first preference would go under on line 1, under survey scenario 1, over on first preference. If, for example, you say, well, I like option A for the high school, but I like option B for the intermediate schools, then you would go online where it says survey scenario 3, and then you would put your sticker under first preference that way. And it's the same thing for whether you pick option A, B, or C. There's 3 intermediate choices then for each of the high school options. One is where you do nothing. The other is option A and then option B. Yes.
Is there a reason why FLW and West Milwaukee are put together and you don't have options of pulling one out or the other out? So only doing West Milwaukee or only doing FLW? Was there a rationale for that, I guess?
Yeah, Matt, you can jump in here, but the way I understand it is that to present it as one or the other, it means we end up keeping lane. Right, so if we're only going to do FLW, we probably need West Milwaukee and lane. And the idea here is the right sides, right? So that to go to 2 intermediate schools. So Matt, you can jump in if there's more.
No, Marty, you're correct. And it also was the general consensus was to try to make an investment on both sides of the community. And so that we're being fair with spreading that investment to all of our students and not selecting, one group of students that would be attending a building to have an improved space and the other would not. So there's no doubt that can be done if the board is interested in doing that. We did have, collectively, we've generally always been talking about both buildings as a single project, but Noah, to your point, if the board has an interest in breaking those up, we could. It might just create the dynamic where Lane has to stay open and or we're selecting which side of the district or which group of students would receive the improved intermediate before the others.
So are we saying that that FLW in West Milwaukee would be able to house all of our intermediate students without renovation? Is that the
Yeah.
correct indication? Okay,
Correct.
The other thing I guess I would add here, too, if you can still hear me, is that keep in mind that this is really about surveying. It's not about your preference for which solution. It can be, I shouldn't say that. But I think the goal of this activity is to start to narrow down which option or options you as a board are most interested in seeing surveyed. And then as we get this information tonight, we're going to spend a few minutes discussing it and try to talk through some different strategies as to how we might want to survey the pathway that you're potentially leaning towards tonight.
Okay, so that makes a big difference if we really think about that. Because like if personally, like we say, or, you know, we're like, oh my gosh, we love option A. And, you know, we only picked, you know, my first one was say, I don't want to do anything to the intermediates. That one is my first. And we stay within those first three and just 1, 2, 3, then the survey never addresses any of those other things, correct? I mean, then we're just staying in that. So we have to think about that. This is about surveying what we would want the community to know more about, like how do they feel about these things? So it seems almost like you'd have to put something in about all of them.
This is kind of like a survey. The survey is to how much money do we think we can get? And these are the ideas that we want to do with the money that we're trying to get. So let's say, you know, option A, I think we could probably all, the way I hear it is we all fairly feel the one comprehensive high school sounds like a great idea. But maybe we think our community would be willing to do $210 million. I mean, could we set the dollar amount of what we're going after? And then this is what we would do. You know, like I don't believe if we option A on both options and asking for that amount of money, I really find it is going to be a difficult ask. Would that be a fair statement?
Which one? I'm sorry.
Option A for both.
Oh, option A for both.
If we did option A for both, and it
Scenario
came back
two.
as our number one, that's option A for both is $281 million, right? I really
Right,
not
that's what I'm
necessarily believe,
saying.
but we think that the high school 180, we love it, but then we asked for 210 million. Where does that extra money go towards and what are our options with that? Like, what is the threshold that we feel our community is willing to give us?
I think you're talking about option 3 then, because where we're looking at, based on what these buildings need, like the CIP and all those other things. If we really want that comprehensive high school, which I think is, I don't want to speak for everyone, but I think that's, you know, a good, amazing goal to set upon our district. You're looking at option B almost for middle school. That kind of splits that big difference from $303 to $285. That 300 number, I think that's to scare people. Even though it's like 84 cents a day.
Right.
I see someone over there with a calculator, so.
I mean, that's the
And I know
trick.
what you- I know what you're
Like,
trying to
what
say,
is
like,
our
what-
dollar amount that
Yeah.
the community is going to be willing to?
But I think that's what the survey is.
That's
gonna
what-
tell
that's
us.
what-
Yeah.
So that's what I'm like, that's what our, just like,
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, do we think going with both option A's is gonna, and we surveyed it, that we're gonna?
This to the whole team, but after this question about FLW West Milwaukee and we have to do something to both, and now I'm rethinking that, a different strategy, so this is a bit of a curveball to throw at everybody. Might be the option of, combine high school and remodel West Milwaukee, we can still get down to 2 intermediates, and then we're doing a big project west and a big project east.
That's what I was going towards.
And that's
There you go.
220 million.
Because it's
Oh.
east and west, and if we're doing a huge thing on the west, then we put the most renovation we can into West Milwaukee Intermediate to be able to house the students that we need to, and do minimal to no renovation at FLW at this point, because that's still to be considered a west side school. So that's why I was asking
That could be
that
a,
question.
like
That's
a
why I said if we
later
had to renovate
phase.
both.
Right.
If we only have to renovate one, then we can still fit them both in FLW and
Right.
West Milwaukee. And leave FLW mainly alone and leave it as a part B of this, because we still have the elementary that we haven't even talked
Or
about.
whatever.
Phase 4 after season, yeah.
Cut it into quarters, every 5 years. Like for every 5 years, we'll reassess with our interest rate and how we borrowed.
Right.
we
Because as you
refinance.
pay off, then it's easier to go back to the community and say, well, we can now get another, $40 million, but your mill rate will stay exactly the same.
Mhm.
Right, so that we need a cliff in the financing, and we've paid off everything, and so our mill rate keeps dropping, and we didn't take advantage of the moment yet. But that's an interesting one. Matt, I don't think about that.
Yeah, I hadn't thought about that either. I think it's intriguing, and we will, as we narrow in on this, the next layer of discussion yet tonight is going to be, just so you guys can layer this into your thought process, is do you want to survey, we want to survey option 3, 265.5 million community. Do you support it? Yes or no? Or do you want to survey kind of a 2-layered approach whereby we ask the community if they would support going to one comprehensive high school for 180.2 million? Get a thumbs up or thumbs down on that, and then ask a second question, which would be, in addition to the one comprehensive high school, would you support an investment in West Milwaukee Intermediate School for an additional dollar amount and tax impact of? So that would give you better data if we layered the 2 questions in, because we can get we can find out what people think independently on the high school alone. And then we can also give the community the chance to weigh in on whether they think that additional investment for an intermediate is too much, or if they agree with it.
We do a thumbs up, thumbs down where we're at on this.
I just had one quick question. So if we close, let's say we go ahead and we close Lane, how are we going to decide how we're going to divide up these schools? Because you could essentially, like, I'm on this side, you could send my kid to West Milwaukee if you wanted to, if we did a south, south, north, south, or are we gonna maintain the west, east type thing?
So that's a little bit of a detail that's a little further out. But obviously we would go through a process of redrawing the boundaries, and Jeff Borland was our internal expert that worked really closely with the city of West Allis in particular, and their information services expert that helped figure out kind of where is everybody living, where's the future
Yeah.
likelihood for where kids are going to be, and that's how we came up with the boundaries. So we'd go through a similar process of redrawing it.
I'm just thinking in terms of how we draw them, because if we're saying, okay, we want to make an investment in a west side school, the new unnamed high school, we want to invest on an east side school, but then I don't want anyone to feel like, okay, well, we create, and I know it's down the line, but something to think about is if we create boundaries where maybe west side kids, are going to West Milwaukee. I just don't want anyone to feel cheated in the community, like they're not getting that, the renovations for their school, or, their kids aren't going to directly benefit from. Yes, that's what I'm saying.
But they're with the comprehensive high school, everyone's gonna
That's true.
benefit from that,
Right.
unless
That
it's
is
just
true.
docu, they're all gonna
Eventually.
benefit from that.
That is-
I think the biggest benefit would be the high school.
Yeah, well,
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, and what we did last time with those boundaries is it was a combination between transportation cost limitation and then trying to get not an east-west boundary, but it was more of a north-south L-shaped thing, so we could be able to get people who live on the west still going to the east side school and vice versa. So that we were trying to muddle that line, if you will, a bit, so there wasn't that clear delineation with east and west. So I can envision something similar would happen if we went down that road again. So another thing that I thought about is that, we looking at A for both or B for both, we could do A for one and B for another as far as these renovations go, and that would also change the dollar amounts that we're looking at too. To be able to if we're looking at a question for the community. And I like Matt's suggestion about, asking about the comprehensive high school question, and if they are willing to support $180.2 for that. And then an additional question regarding the intermediate school or schools, and seeing how they felt about that, and then what the total dollar amount would be. So what are we thinking about that?
I think we solved a couple problems with the old two birds with one stone scenario with two layered questions. And I think we're really asking for more input from the community, like, hey, we're really giving them the role and choosing this, and it's their choice.
And
I like
understanding,
that approach.
and like understanding that this is a 20-year commitment to taxes and stuff like that. And but with the refinancing put in, we could have after the high school and the middle school is done, throw in Franklin, right, or whatever it is, to say, hey, look, nothing's gonna change. Now we're just gonna make this middle school awesome as well.
And on a similar note, kind of like Dr. Lexman was saying, like to create that clip, a lot of districts already have Fund 39 debt, which is referendum debt. We don't. So our total revenue limit right now, the debt that we have is all Fund 38 debt within the revenue limit. So once we create that cliff with the referendum debt, if/when, then you can create that cliff where you can hold the mill rate more steady. Right now, we just don't have that option because we don't have Fund 39 debt. So once we have that on our books, we have so much more flexibility in terms of adding additional projects and restructuring debt so that that mill rate can stay steady. Without Fund 39 debt, you're just left up to your revenue limit and your equalization in dollar amount that just tells you your mill rate. That's just continuing to drop.
So I think one of my options I think I would like to have is the two question option. I think is a good one. One, to have the full 180.2 for the comprehensive high school, and the other one to have the full option A for West Milwaukee and have that be 1 2-tiered question. But what other questions do we want to include? Both want to have one that would include both FLW and West Milwaukee as the second tier question? And do we want to entertain any other dollar amounts, options B or C for the comprehensive high school?
I really don't, in my opinion, see a need. I mean, if we're gonna go for it, we gotta go for option A. I think that just makes the most sense. And that the $8 million between option A and B and going all the way down on the option C.
Yeah.
I don't even, I don't know. I don't look at option C at the moment.
Is that a consensus among the board? Does anyone have any comments about that?
Your question there. Oh, I'm sorry. I was gonna say something.
No, if I could quickly jump in. The simpler we make the survey, the better data we're gonna get.
Okay.
So if as a board, you can reach consensus around our preferred high school option and our preferred additive intermediate school option, that'd be the best case scenario. It's gonna be cleanest, it's gonna be easiest for community members to understand. If we can't get there, I'm guessing we can figure out a way to do different surveys, but I honestly think if at all possible, that would be the cleanest and would give you the best set of data coming out of the survey process.
Yeah, and I guess that's why I was breathing. I was about to kind of agree with what Bill said there. I think at this point, my preference would be to get the community's perspective on the 180 million option. Like, that's what I want to know. Like, will you buy into this? Are you behind it? Do you agree that's necessary? If not, then I guess we'll go back to the drawing board. But to me, that's kind of one of the most important questions.
So thumbs up, thumbs down if we wanted to just 180.2 million for the high school question. Thumbs up, thumbs down. All right, is Heather here? I don't. She's not in here? Okay. So we have a consensus on the high school question, 180.2. Now for the question regarding middle school. So do we want to do only West Milwaukee? Do you want to do a combination? What are our thoughts on that? And do we want to do A or B if we want to do a combination?
I like the option of West Milwaukee because I think that's more attainable for us.
Okay.
It's both sides of the city.
Everyone's
It's,
already.
in the sales world, It's a win-win. It's a win. And that sounds like a win-win to me.
Is it possible, have it noted in there that Frank Lloyd Wright would come as this later?
Yeah, so I think in what was it, 6 pages? Yeah, it's
Eight.
gonna be 8 pages.
8 pages.
That'll be described that this is
Okay.
a long range and there'll be kind of multiple efforts to modernize buildings.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So
so-
I would agree, I think West Milwaukee, just from the perspective of, something for the east, something for the west, I think that makes sense. My one concern, and that's what I do want it to be communicated that FLW is, still in the plan down the road, is I feel like there's a lot of areas that really do need attention at FLW.
Yeah.
The auditorium is definitely one of them and a few other key areas. So making sure we're communicating that as well, I think is going to be huge throughout that process.
Yeah, and we can do that through that because this really is like we've been calling all along, a long range facilities master plan. This is just would be the first phase, in a multiple phase approach to getting us to where, we feel the students and the community should be.
Is there an
If
option
I
in the
can-
survey if someone's like, oh, I only want to support this if FLW is also included in it, that there's like a free text or like a comment section within the survey? So if someone wanted to provide some of that information, they could, yes, I do lots of nods. Okay, great.
Yeah, there is an ability to put comments in there, and we also asked this question when we were initially developing the draft of the survey. Individuals do have the ability, if they're doing it online, to go back and change an answer that they did previously as well.
Up until it's closed, yeah, great. Other comments or questions about the intermediate plan? So right now, we're looking at option A for West Milwaukee only and leaving FLW as is at this point, with these plans kept in the back of our mind for a future project
We're looking at about like 230.
in total.
Yeah, 229.3.
229 point, yeah, 3. So
So that would be
that's with option A for,
So just a little bit more than the total cost for option A.
So it'd be similar to option, to survey scenario 8.
Yeah.
Which, so those dollars in there, that estimated annual tax impact for $100,000, I mean, the equalized value of a home, that's $100,000 would see an additional $237 approximately on their property tax bill, their school portion of their property tax bill.
How much is that per day?
So I'm not doing that in my head, so divide that by 365 is 65 cents a day. That's for a $100,000 home. So let's say a home is valued at $200,000, that's $1.30 a day.
Well, people complain no matter what. I mean, we can put it in whatever increments we want per minute, per second. It doesn't matter. They're gonna be like, oh, I have to spend this much. So
Yeah.
that's fine. But I think it's all about the story, how we tell, it, how we present it, and how it's logical. It's got to make logical sense to somebody about why we need to do what we're doing. And so that'll all come in the
Right. and-
communication pieces that we're doing.
And that's why I had brought this up before. So we're saying that we're surveying them. And then it tells us, oh, they're not going for this. And if I'm a community member and I get the survey and I take the survey and it says, would you be in favor of this 180 million? I'm probably going to say no. But I'm only going to say no on the survey because I don't understand the benefits. I don't understand that it's only going to be 55 cents a day and this is going to, I don't have all that background knowledge. So again, so if I would say no, like as a community member, because I'm not seeing the benefits. I'm not having this rich conversation. I'm not part of this. And so I asked last time and you asked this before. So we're not gonna do our communication to them until after the survey. So, but
there is
it's,
communication
I
in the
can tell
survey.
you what they're gonna say. They're gonna say no.
There's 8 pages on the survey. Much of it is dedicated to explaining what we're trying to do here.
So it is, like,
Yeah.
it'll be in there, like, you'll put in there, like, these are the reasons, this is why it would be, I mean, I think that's so important, otherwise it's just,
Well, yeah, here's the way Bill's gonna do a survey.
Right.
Done these, so I think we gotta trust the giving him the parameters of what we want
Right.
to do, he's gonna craft a survey that's gonna give the right amount of data. that-
He does
Okay.
that all the time.
Right, I get that.
Yes.
I guess
You
I'm
know?
just, I can't wrap my head around what it will look like or what it will
Yeah.
sound
And
like. you
and
know,
remember,
like
this
I
isn't,
am-
this isn't in stone. If we get
Yeah.
the survey stuff back and we feel like people maybe didn't understand or whatever, I mean, that's where we can
Yeah.
come back and mull these over and figure out, you know, what's our next step.
And remember, you'll see the entire survey and we'll be asking the board to vote on it, to approve it
Oh.
before it goes. So you'll have an opportunity to talk about, is the story right? Do we have the right
Okay.
parts of it? told
Okay,
well?
I'm very comfortable with that then.
I think the big confusion for people is gonna be, they're gonna see a number, $100,000, $187, and they are gonna think their taxes are only going up $187. They don't realize what's coming from the city and other places. You know they're gonna be up here. Well, you told me it's only gonna be this. Mine went up 300. They don't understand how it's calculated.
Right, and that's why we stay on message with the school portion of the property tax.
Right.
No.
And then, as Dr. Lexman said, that's what the next workshop would be, was you would see the next iteration of that survey with what you've talked about tonight with 180.2 million, and then the West Milwaukee option as well, and that what that question would look like. And then you'd see the whole 8 pages of it. So not only the 3 or 4 you saw last time,
Right.
but everything based on what you decide tonight. And then, as Dr. Lexman said, you'd be able to look at that and say, well, I don't like the way this is worded, or we should do this. And then we'd revise it. And then it would come to you at a regular school board meeting with the revisions that you had, suggested. And then you'd say yay or nay, we're ready to go.
So intermediate plan. I see a lot of nodding heads, but we can get an official thumbs up, thumbs down, only looking at option A for West Milwaukee. No, nothing, no renovations to FLW at this point. That would be the secondary question. Okay, looks like it is. So we got one, option A, comprehensive high school, option A, West Milwaukee only for the questions we want for them.
We don't need to do the stickers.
Nope.
I was gonna say, so we don't-
Stickers, I
Sorry, I
was
tried to
getting-
simplify things.
Yeah, for all the hours.
This
of
process
time.
worked too.
If there was more discussion
You're
about
number
more,
one.
then we could have done that way.
Right.
But it seemed like people were pretty on board with that. Okay, so is there,
There's a few more slides. left.
okay, I'm sorry, go ahead.
So the next slide on the hypothetical tax impacts, we we're just drawing back to our large chart, but we really just talked through it on the small chart. Bear was able to get us the dollar amounts for each of those scenarios, so we can just pass that by and move on to our next step.
Yeah, so this actually was meant to conclude kind of the workshops with the board. What we talked about is that we think, having 2 weeks for Bill Foster to work on the survey, we'll meet as a planning team in the interim. And so we'll probably put feelers out for an extra board meeting on August 30th. So we're just using every single Monday of our lives right now. And then come back, so there won't be one meeting on Labor Day, okay?
Yeah.
We appreciate
Well,
that.
yes.
Yeah,
So
that's
then
fine.
it'll be the first regular meeting in September, where we'll come back with after your feedback on the survey, with hopefully that date to approve it. And what Bill said, it keeps us within the timeline of getting it all ready, getting the pre-communication going and getting it out there. So we get it back in a cycle that if the board wants to go to referendum yet in April, we got to keep the timeline kind of moving now. So that's why another extra meeting on the 30th is helpful. And again, we go back to what we're trying to accomplish here, right? And so the refined message that is actually, the language we started with in 1 is now, how do we right size and modernize, right? That's what number 1 has come down to now. And then do it in a way that our community will support. And so I think we're living up to the guiding principles, and I think today was really cool progress. So I'm excited to see how the community responds.
I got a big ask on selling it to the teachers. I really want us to stay focused, telling them a positive message, especially Lane. you know, and what potentially could happen there. Because we really need to get the teachers on board big time.
Yep, agreed.
Just to see how we sell it.
Yep.
Any other comments, or questions before we end this portion of the meeting? Well, thank you very much again, Matt, and the team for all the work you've done on this. I think as far as being able to condense all the time and effort that went into the faculty meetings into these 3 workshops, I commend you on being able to do that and make it understandable. And obviously, a lot of work that went into this. So thank you very much for that. And next steps will be to see what the community has to say once we approve that survey. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
That's giving everybody the thumbs up.
Great. Thanks, Matt.
Thanks, Matt.
So I have a 5-minute recess in here. Is that something that we want to do before we move on to the action portion of the meeting? If anyone needs rep, we're good. We don't have to take it. We're good?
Yep.
All right, so let us move right into our action items here tonight. Item 8, employment summary report, Dr. Lexman.
Yeah, so we're bringing this forward just because we're in the hiring process, the intensity of it, the market is really competitive. And so while we're meeting, we thought who's ever on the employment summary that would wait until next week, let's get them approved now and get it committed. And the one in particular here is the new deeper learning coach for West Milwaukee Intermediate. Connie Bergman, the principal there, should be interested in getting the new DLC approved as soon as possible, because then that's a 12-month position. The new person could start work tomorrow. She really wants that person on board. So that's why, just in interest to support her and just to keep our processes moving, we thought we'd add it this evening and just keep it all moving forward.
Any questions on that? So I believe the action is actually item 8.1, the executive summary, which is the employment summary. I have it here, employment summary.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yes,
Okay.
yes.
So it'd be item 8.1, I'm looking for a motion.
Move to approve.
Second.
Moving seconded. Any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? All right, that passes. Item 8.2, final employee handbook.
And so each year, so this is an annual item, we're a little behind in terms of the timing this year. We bring forward the latest revisions of the employee handbook. The new additions to it are noted on the executive summary. One of the big sections is the new professional educator compensation model. But we've also added things around crowdfunding, because that has become a little bit of a free-for-all and it's trying to have some management around it. And so the example we use is that where you support crowdfunding when teachers go out to ask for things that are really unique and innovative and over and above what normal school budgets should be supplying. And so now we have a process where teachers can make requests. We review it at directors, and we have said no to a number of them because we said this is really something we should be able to fund through our budgets. And so we don't want teachers going out to ask for things that, would normally be paid for by a principal's school budget or a district budget. But things that are over and above. So we added that section because we're asking leaders and teachers this year to blog as part of the reflections that contribute to the evaluation process. Our attorneys have advised we need some language around property rights. So who owns that kind of intellectual property that gets built as part of employment? There we kind of created a balancing act where we want to essentially kind of own it, but also allow teachers to use it going forward if they leave us. So we wanted a nice balance in there. So we've added some of those sections. The other big changes are all of the alignment to the new policies, right? So all of the Neola policies. And the big work that Beulah Vetter did for us, one of the attorneys there, is go into every single policy where we have language that is a direct copy out of the policy in the handbook and make sure it's all kind of aligned again. Because the previous handbook was language that was cut and paste right out of the former policies. So this should be all back in alignment, but it is understood. There's kind of a disclaimer in every single handbook that it evolves and things may change during the year. And our responsibility is then to communicate those changes to employees, not necessarily have to come back every time to the board. And the reason I think I mentioned that in the executive summary is we look at some of the policy revisions where we want to align things better to our equity beliefs, and then we'll re-communicate those things as new policies are approved. So we're looking forward to having this piece approved because, we start with new teachers or on Wednesday and everybody else coming back next week. And that's when we start to put it out for acknowledgement, right? So every employee has to sign off that they received the handbook.
Any questions about the handbook? If not, I'd look for a motion.
So moved.
Moved and seconded. Any last minute discussion? All those in favor? Opposed? That passes.
Thank you.
All right, that ends our meeting. And so I would look for a motion for adjourn.
Move to adjourn. Second.
Moved and seconded. Anyone who doesn't want to? All those in favor? Opposed? That passes. We are
Someday
adjourned.
I'll oppose.